Okay, last week or so ago, I did an experiment where I made 4 pizzas, one of which had diastatic malt powder, or DMP, in it. Now, when I was tasting and comparing those 4 pizzas, I noticed that the pizza with DMP had a little more distinct nutty flavor, earthy, nutty type of flavor than the others. And I hadn't really noticed it that much in my previous experiments with DMP. And so I was thinking about it, thinking why it would be any different this time. I used the same amount as before, my previous experiment. And the one thing that I thought of was maybe the fermentation time played a role in it. So when I was doing my first DMP experiments, I was using an overnight cold ferment. But then with this experiment I did a week ago, it was a 2-night cold ferment, a 2-stage ferment, bulk ferment, whatever you want to call it. And so I thought maybe that had something to do with it. So I wanted to experiment. And so I made 2 dough balls. Both of them were a 2-night cold ferment. One of them had my regular amount of sugar in there, and the other had DMP, the same amount that I used for the previous experiment. And I wanted to see if this longer ferment would affect the actual flavor of the dough made with the DMP. And so I did it, and here you go. Take a look. These 2 pizzas look the exact same. The crusts look the exact same. They had the same level of crispiness. They had the same strength. And they, again, going back to my previous experiments, they just tasted almost identical. Just the tiniest little deviation did I taste in the DMP one. And so I don't know what's going on. Maybe last week when I did it, I had 4 pizzas and maybe my palate was just a little more refined or sensitive. But regardless, all these experiments have shown me with DMP that any taste difference is totally small, very small, if anything. I mean, just the smallest little change in taste. I was curious. I did a little more research to figure out exactly how DMP differs from sugar in the process, the fermentation process. And so here's what I read. What yeast does is it converts the naturally occurring sugars in the flour into carbon dioxide gas, which makes little bubbles, and the bubbles make the dough expand. Okay. Now, what DMP does is it's based out, it's like made from barley. You put it in the dough, in the flour, and the DMP helps to convert the naturally occurring starches in the flour into sugar, which in turn, the more sugar created helps the dough rise faster. So basically, adding sugar is like a 1-stage process. You're adding sugar to the dough, so the yeast is now converting naturally occurring sugar and the sugar you added into more carbon dioxide. But when you add DMP, it's a 2-stage process where you're converting the starch, you're accelerating the conversion of starch into sugar, from which the yeast will convert to carbon dioxide gas. So you're getting basically the same results, just a little different method, a little different way. But then, of course, the DMP from the barley has its own little distinct flavor, which, from my experience, is very minimal. So I don't really have anything to add other than this is confirmed all of my previous experiments that DMP adds only the slightest taste difference, and the taste difference is totally subjective. If you like that little tiny earthy flavor, and it is very small flavor, then go ahead and use it. And that's it. That's going to be my last experiment with DMP. Using sugar is just easier for me and tastes as good or better than DMP, in my opinion. So that's what I'll do. And that's that. No more DMP videos for me. Thanks.